Welcome back, Principal Matters podcast listeners. This is Dr. Jen Schwanke, and I am here with my co-host, Will Parker. Hi,
Hi,
Will.
Jen. It's so great to see you. And I'm so excited about the guests that you're going to bring to because you did this interview this week.
Yes, this is my friend Rachel Edoho-Eket and Brad Johnson. They're here to talk about their book. And if you don't know Rachel or Brad, this is a great introduction to what they do, what they say, what they think, how they lead. But we have a really complex question here. When you first shared this with me, I thought, oh, that's simple. And then I started thinking about my answer, and it is not simple. So why don't I read the question? And I'm doing that deliberately, so you have to go first. Okay, here's the question. This person is thinking about retiring in a year, but says, I want to do something part-time. What are some options you've learned about consulting that I might be able to develop for me?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jen, and we usually take about 5 minutes here to do our Q&A, so there's no way we can unpack this in 5 minutes, but I'll just say a few things. Someone listening, you may or may not be relating to this question, but you might. And I have had more and more people reaching out to me over the last couple of years asking about how do you get into the work you're doing and what have you learned about this? And you and I have talked about these things, Jen, together offline a lot. You and I have done work together. So when I started doing my consulting, I'm going to call it that, when I started doing presentations or speaking or training or teaching, I first began doing it for free because I had things I wanted to share. And so I would look for opportunities at conferences or workshops or area schools that were hosting events. And if someone invited me or if they had an opening, like send in a request for presentation, I would just look for those opportunities. And so a lot of the introduction into this kind of work begins by just looking for a need and showing up and figuring out a way that you can help. If you want it to develop into something that becomes maybe like a part-time thing or a paid consulting opportunity, then that goes a little deeper. That requires you thinking about the value you have to bring to others, building deep enough relationships with groups or individuals that they would want to contract with you over either once or a long time, but also creating a presence for yourself, and whether that's a website or a LinkedIn page, or I'll add one other option, connecting with groups that already have consulting operations that are looking for people. So it doesn't have to just be a one-man show. It could be also a part of an organization. And there's lots of them out there. I won't name them all, Jen, but that's where I would begin those conversations. What about you?
I'm glad you said that about, basically you've got to find your audience and you have to find what you want to say. I get this question a lot with how to write a book, and I'm actually putting together a series to kind of answer that question. But the very first thing is, why? Somebody said to me, well, I want to because I kind of want to be famous. And I was like, that is not the right way. First of all, that's not going to happen. And second of all, it's more about your message and how you're going to make a difference. And it's hard work. It's hard work to be a consultant. I don't think people know that. You don't wake up and the phone starts ringing. You really have to decide what you want to say, decide how you're going to say it. And to me, a great way to kick the tires is to do some presentations at some conferences, put in a proposal. If it's rejected, tweak the proposal. If a conference doesn't want to hear what you have to say, then certainly as a consultant, your message might fall flat. So, dip the toe in the water first, see what works, see what your words do to resonate with others, and then decide how you can build on that.
Yeah. And then I'll add one other thing, Jen, that was helpful for me. If you have something of value you want to be sharing and you feel frustrated that you can't get the yes or you don't have enough opportunities, don't wait for someone's permission. You can still share it. You could do it. You could post articles on your LinkedIn website. You could start your own email list. You could reach out to friends with things that you're learning. You could invite younger leaders into Zoom conversations and just pour into them. And you don't have to wait for someone's invitation to create the kind of platform for sharing and encouraging others. But it's that practice that helps you then get a sense for what it's going to feel like to do that as a potential opportunity that might be something you could do part-time or full-time in the future.
I'm glad you said that. I know we've got to wrap up, but the world has changed. You don't need an invitation. You can create your own
Yeah.
audience. So thank you for that, Will. How can
Yeah.
people get a hold of you? Speaking of consulting, if they need you to come
Well,
and help them, how can
yeah.
that
Well, they
happen?
can reach out through our website at williamdparker.com or email me at will@williamdparker.com. And I'd love to talk or connect or reflect. How about you, Jen?
Perfect. Find me at jenschwanke.com or email me at jen@jenschwanke.com.
Yeah. And I'll say one other word, Jen, before we talk to Rachel and Brad. Both of these guests are educators who have also stepped into those worlds of writing and consulting. And so listen closely as you guys hear this conversation, because you're going to be sitting in a room with people that have done the hard work of that kind of exploration too. And their contact information will be at the end of the show too. So it's not just Jen and me you can talk to, but all of our guests are people that you could reach out to as well. So thank you, Jen, for bringing this conversation. And Principal Matters, thank you for doing what matters. We'll talk to you soon. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Over 1 million teachers use iExcel in their classrooms every day for one reason. They love it. Why? iExcel is where the magic happens. With just one platform, teachers can personalize learning for every student. iExcel gives teachers all the tools they need to enhance and differentiate instruction without adding work to their plates. Plus, iExcel has decades of expertise and has proven to be effective. Studies on more than 70,000 schools across nearly 50 states show that those who use iExcel outperform others on state tests. Ready to bring the magic to your school? Visit iexcel.com/PM to learn more. As a school leader, you have a vision of a thriving, supportive educational environment where every teacher and student can succeed. With DigiCoach, you can turn that vision into reality. Imagine walking into a classroom with DigiCoach on your mobile device. Its customizable look-fors and pre-written feedback statements streamline your feedback process, saving you precious time. You're not just observing, you're actively supporting your teachers while generating data to drive instructional change. With the new coaching plan feature, you can effortlessly document action plans and coaching conversations. This ensures every teacher is supported, and you can track their progress related to your campus goals. DigiCoach empowers you to customize the platform to fit your specific needs, reinforcing your vision at every step. And when you need support, the DigiCoach team becomes your team, with consulting efforts focused on realizing your organization's goals. By using DigiCoach, you lead your school to remarkable progress. Ready to turn your vision into reality? Visit digicoach.com and tell them Will Parker sent you.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Welcome back to the Principal Matters Podcast, the show where we talk about the things that actually move the needle in school leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, and today we are diving deep into the heartbeat of every successful school, and that is the people. We've all heard that leadership is about strategy and about systems, but my guests today argue that if you don't have the relationship, the strategy really doesn't matter. So joining me are two powerhouses in the field of education. First, Dr. Brad Johnson. He is a guru in education, a keynote speaker known for his high energy storytelling, and he's the author of over 20 books, including his latest, Coffee with the Custodian. We're going to ask him about that a little later. And beside him is Dr. Edoho-Eket. She is a National Blue Ribbon School principal, a TEDx speaker, and the president of the Maryland Association of Elementary School Principals. Together, they have co-authored a transformative new book. It's called Relational Intelligence, and they are here to challenge that myth of command and control leadership and show us how to lead with heart, trust, and authenticity. Brad, Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Mine may lag a little bit. My internet is horrible at home, so I apologize from the start.
Well, everybody should bring at least one flaw to a podcast recording. My flaw today is we just got a new puppy, and the puppy is in this cage, and he is not happy with me because the rule should be if I'm home, he's out. So if we hear barking and crying, it's okay. It's part of the training. Rachel, anything, any heads up from you?
First of all, you are breaking a rule, and I feel sorry for your puppy. I do not have any pets, but I can empathize with how your puppy is feeling right now. It is not fair. What am I bringing? It's a Friday, and I'm looking forward to the weekend and whatever fun it has in store. After ending a fun week.
That's great. Yes, it is that, it's March, comes in like that lion and goes out like a
Yes.
lion. So school leaders understand how that is. So you guys, let's dig right in. I really want to give time and space for all of your beautiful thoughts today. So let's start with the why of relational intelligence. You both know that leadership is a people business. It's not a system to manage. So let's think about our listeners, the principal who might be currently overwhelmed by compliance, by spreadsheets, by emails. How can they begin to shift their mindset toward this relational intelligence without feeling like they're kind of dropping the ball on that manager side of things?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. As a working and current principal, it is extremely demanding and busy. And that's something that I've had to grapple with myself and thinking about. Here's a perfect example. Should I spend a couple more minutes writing an email, or should I go out into my building and, have a conversation with a student or with a staff member or a family? And every time that I have chosen to pause my emails, pause my paperwork, get up and make a connection with someone, it has, been a great conversation or a great moment, or it has always been worth the time. And so what I try to say to principals is paperwork is always going to be there. We're always going to have emails. We're always going to have that. But the time with people is what is limited. And that's what we have to prioritize throughout our day.
Absolutely. And I'll just piggyback on that. So, yeah, with our book, Relational Intelligence, it really is about the relationship part. And you said earlier, and that's kind of our go-to phrase, is that education is a people business. Leadership at its core, and I won't get like too technical here, but or too college sounding class, but most leadership was developed during the Industrial Revolution, so people could become managers and manage the assembly lines that were being developed. And so leadership in a lot of ways was developed to be a technical system. Something's working, you leave it alone. If it breaks, you figure out what broke, how to fix it, and then fix it and go on. But that's not what happens when you deal with people. And so we don't call that a technical system. We call it an adaptive, or what we like to call a human system. And so that has layers to it. So you're dealing with people that are coming from different backgrounds, that have different motivations, that have different things going on in their life. We're not standardized. And so we have all these different issues. And so understanding that the relational or the relationship aspect of leadership is the most critical is really the heart of what education is supposed to be about.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking, I wonder, there are very few professions, I think, that are this grounded in people. Like it's all people, literally, that's it. And I don't know of many industries. I was thinking, well, maybe Hollywood, but an actor doesn't need to deal with literally thousands of people who are their clientele,
Right.
their bosses, so to speak. So it really is deep into the relational piece. So I was thinking about your book title, Relational Intelligence, and I was thinking about another word that is used, emotional intelligence, that EQ versus the RQ. How are they different, and why is it specifically the defining trait, that RQ, for school leaders in today's educational climate?
Yeah, so I'll start, Rachel. So EQ is really more about your emotional intelligence, really. My being self-aware, being empathetic, that kind of thing. So it's kind of understanding yourself, which is really the first step. We always like to equate it to kind of like, being married. The relationship is the key to the marriage, but you kind of have to understand yourself first to be able to interact and engage with that other person. And so the EQ is important. It's important to be self-aware, to understand empathy and things like that. But to really take it to the next level, you have to have that RQ, that relational intelligence. In fact, research says that RQ is more important to success in leadership than even IQ. Because think about it this way, most people move into leadership roles based on what they accomplished. I call it the past competencies. Okay, you're good at this, so you're moving to the next level. You're a great teacher. You're organized. You get, and so we move up based on what we've accomplished. But when you get to that leadership role, you have to really transform your mindset, and it becomes about the other people. And so that's why that relational intelligence is absolutely the most important part. It's more important than anything else you do, because the whole point of the leadership goal is to lead other people. And you can't lead them if you don't know them, if you don't have those relationships with them and understand them, to be able to get the best from them, to be able to support them, to understand their needs, and to help them become their best. So that's why it's not just an important piece, it's really the foundational level of leadership.
Right. That makes sense. Rachel, what do you want to add to that?
I want to add a couple of things, but when you were talking about, Jen, how unique the role is of a school leader and of a central office leader, I think about my day. We are interacting with children, for me, as young as 3 years old. So we have stakeholders that are children and students. We have stakeholders who are our staff members, our teachers. That's a different group of people. We have stakeholders who are our families, our community members. We have stakeholders who are central office leaders. We have politicians who are stakeholders. It is a lot. And so when I think about the role of a principal and the unique ways in which we are having to, I almost say it's like code switching. It's like when you are with one group, you do not speak the same way as with another group. And that's not necessarily EQ at work. That's relational intelligence at work. That's understanding that depending on who you are giving your message to, what is the timing of it? How do I have a relationship? Have I spent the time cultivating this relationship to be able to give a message that is going to upset people, right? Those are all, have I made those relational deposits? I know Dr. Johnson likes to talk about those deposits, right? How many withdrawals have we made? That's really relational intelligence, and that's the essence of our work. And what I like about it is it's not about being extroverted or introverted. It is, those are skills that we can all build on. The skills of building trust, skills of communication, skills of building connections with people. Those are all things that we can get better at, each of us.
I got in a little tiff with my sister once. She was complaining about her boss. I said, what's it like to have one boss? I have 600 kids. They all have a parent, a step parent, a grandparent. So now we're up to about 3,000. And then I have my central office. Oh, and the whole town. So about 96,000 bosses. So have fun with yours. Oh yeah, I have the whole internet too. So yes, I have countless. I have Facebook as a boss. That's so true. Exactly. So let's talk about this idea, Dr. Johnson, you've mentioned replacing connection over compliance. In a school setting where rules and safety are paramount, how can a leader maintain high standards and accountability, but still prioritize that relationship first approach? So we'll start with Dr. Johnson, but then Rachel, I want you to tell us about this, in that day-to-day leadership capacity.
The connection over compliance, I believe, is what you were asking. Yep. And so the thing I like to think about is, I call it the rule of four, and I actually just posted something on that, and it's about prioritizing your time. Focus is the word I like to use. So you have to prioritize. It's like Rachel said a minute ago, you are always going to have a million things going on at once. And if all you do is focus on putting out the fires, you can do that 8 hours a day, every day, because that's the reality of a school. And so you have to focus on those 3 or 4, I call it the 4 goals, the 4 focus goals that you set each week. And those are really what's helping push you towards your vision, your mission, whatever you want to call it. And it has to be about the people. So it's not about like having more meetings. So we're going to have 3 meetings this week or whatever. It's about, okay, I'm going to try and spend time in 10 classrooms this week. Like literally just sit down and listen and build that relationship. Or I'm going to contact, because you mentioned parents a minute ago, I'm going to reach out to 5 families this week. Maybe some that are struggling, maybe some that are having attendance issues. It doesn't always have to be just, hey, how you doing? It can serve a purpose, but you're still focused on relationship and building those connections with them. And to me, the rest of it doesn't really matter if you don't get that part right. To be honest, because it really, what good are the meetings if, it's not important or people don't connect with it or, just there's a million things that can go wrong with that. So focusing on those few things. And again, when we talk about relationships, it's not warm and fuzzy all the time. It can be, okay, I need to have this tough talk with someone because that negativity is influencing the whole school. So, when we talk about I always joke when I get to this part when it's tough. I'm like, is anybody married? Because we know real quick it's not warm and fuzzy. It's real work. It's hard work. That's one of the things I think, especially in the U.S., that we get wrong. We always think of it that way, but relationships are really hard work. But focusing on those 3 or 4 things a week that they are your have to, the focus, the something that you really have to do. And it really is about building those relationships. You think of, I've had people in the past tell me, well, I just wish my principal knew my name, or I wish they knew what I taught. And that's a reality. I'm not saying that, every school's like that, but I'm saying it's a reality where, and, principals, again, if they're focused on what they need to get done all the time, only is from a management perspective, then they will spend all their time doing that. There's just not enough hours in a day. If Rachel just focuses on, setting the schedule and the new curriculum and all this stuff and things coming down from the central office, she doesn't even have enough hours in the day to do that. So you have to make it a focus.
Rachel, I want you to answer that, but I also really want to swing back around to what you talked about earlier with those, withdrawals and deposits and trust. So, talk about transitioning into leadership and how you can convince your staff, I've got it on the compliance stuff, but also I care about you. I see you. You can trust me. How do they do that?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance. I'm glad you asked that question because I think a lot of us struggle with that, especially when we're new leadership. And new in leadership, I know when, first of all, I'm a rule follower and I do say that, but I also have learned over time that sometimes there are some nuances to our work. Sometimes there are some dynamics that may not always be present in a policy or in a guideline. And so that's where you have those relationships and those conversations where you have open communication and saying, here's what the policy says, and we're in alignment with it, but here's where I'm struggling, right? So those are conversations I've had with our staff, but I've also had them with my bosses as well. Like you said, we have lots of bosses. And so, a big part of our work as principals is also providing feedback to our board or to our superintendent to say, this is what it says on paper, but this is actually what's happening, and there's a gap there. Another thing I wanted to bring up was conflict. I mean, Brad alluded to it, but there are times for, in any relationship, personal or professional, we're going to have people who are seemingly on 2 different sides of an issue. And this happens a lot, not only with our staff members, but also with our families. And one of the things that I've learned to do is to try to figure out what those values are and how we can identify the values. Because oftentimes, if we can identify a value, then we can work together from there. So most of the time, a value most teachers have is, or all teachers have is, we want our students to be successful, but there may be different ideas about what does that look like and how does that come to fruition. And that's where the conversations can really hit that starting point. So instead of starting a conversation of you believe this and you believe that, and we're on 2 different sides, I like to start in the middle. We all believe these core things. Now, how can we move in the same direction and come together to create something new? And that's something that we talk about in the book a lot.
Right. This is, I'm really glad you brought that up. And this sounds obnoxious. I don't mean it to be. I wrote a book on conflict management. Yeah. And one of the things that's resonating most with readers is not the staff conflict portion of the book, but that parent piece, right? Yeah. And if I had a dime for every time I've sat in a meeting and I heard a educator say, well, we want the same thing. We want your kid to succeed, but the parent needs to be shown. The parent needs to believe you, right? And that's where this relational intelligence comes in, because you can't just say it and have it be true. You
Yes.
have to be able to demonstrate that. And so, that does require some vulnerability. And Rachel, when you were talking about going to your literal bosses and saying, hey, there might be a gap here, that does take vulnerability, because we all want to look like we are awesome and perfect and we do everything so well. When is the time for either one of you when showing vulnerability strengthen your authority?
Yeah, one of the things because here's the thing, when we talk about the relational intelligence and stuff, it kind of resonates because when you think of leaders, they tend to be self-sufficient, competitive, and all those things that
Mhm.
don't lend themselves to being relational people. You talked about education's very different. It's because it's what we call a high agreeableness field. Your teachers are kind, caring, empathetic. They don't like conflict, which is one of the reasons we talk a lot about that, because they don't like disagreement. They're agreeable people. And so it makes it tough to do that. And so it goes back to with you asked earlier about the trust, I think, and we talk about building trust capital. And so it really is about just listening to the people. It's about the small moments. It's about because I talked about the like knowing their name and things like that. Um, that trust building is taking the time to know them, not just as a professional, but as a person first. Hey, how did your child do in the recital, or whatever that it is, or how's your mom doing, kind of thing. And so that's why I talked about going back to like the relationship thing. It really is about knowing what's going on in their life and letting them see that you genuinely care. And that builds trust. That builds trust faster than anything. And so that builds trust too, where like seeking input from them and actually listening to them. We tell administrators all the time, seek input and feedback. It doesn't mean you will always use all of it, but you have professionals there that have good ideas and good insight and a lot of experience. And so when you start to incorporate some of that, you build that trust capital really quick. And you were asking about like the expend or the building. And so the expense of it is sometimes, like Rachel said, when there's disagreements or sometimes there's hard decisions she has to make that they may not agree with, but they know that she's on their side enough to be able to accept what she's doing. And so back to that vulnerability, that's part of it there with that. The other part is like for someone, and this may be the hardest thing, but this will be build you the most trust, is to let them know, hey, you know what? I'm not really good at like showing appreciation, but I'm going to work on it. I'm not good at, the small talk, but I'm going to work on it. And so that's being vulnerable instead of just kind of ignoring it or, well, moving on or whatever, but letting them see that, hey, I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all together. I may not be good at this, but I want you to know I'm going to try. And so that's where I think that vulnerability comes in.
Yeah.
One of the things, this isn't about vulnerability, but it is about talking to people about who they are. This is just a quick tip. I worked with a principal once who, outside of every teacher's classroom, it says, Mrs. Schwanke, room 137. She had them all put the college they graduated from. And it was great for two reasons. It was a great model for students, but two, you guys, the conversations, people walk in and be like, Marshall, what? I went to blank, or you went to Allegheny College. Isn't that near Slippery Rock? That's where I went. And it just started conversations. And so people could, say, oh my gosh, did Dayton make it to the Final Four this year? It was just a super easy way to start that conversation, because you can't walk in a room and be like, so how many kids do you have? But
Right.
you can get there if you have that opening. Rachel, tell us about the HOPE framework.
Yeah, that's actually part of Brad's work. So can I say something about the
Oh,
vulnerability piece
oh my
really
gosh.
quickly?
Yes.
Thank you.
You talk about vulnerability and then I'll throw hope at
Yes.
Brad.
So one of the things I always impress upon school leaders is some of the mistakes that I made earlier in my career. So I was a new principal during COVID-19, and it was extremely hard. That was my first year, was 19 to 20 as a principal, and I remember thinking I have to appear as perfect as possible,
Mhm.
especially since so much change was happening. I wanted everyone to believe that I had it all together. I wanted everyone to believe that I was going to get every answer that they needed, right? I wanted that. But what happened was my facade quickly began to wear away because I was extremely stressed. I
Mhm.
also had third grade twins at home that were learning as well. And it was very stressful time in our family and beyond, and for our staff as well. And I remember going to a meeting one time and just saying to staff, like, I'm struggling. I'm really having a problem keeping up. And that was the first time I'd actually publicly admitted to the staff that I was not okay. You know, I think originally I wasn't going to say that, but I'm glad that I did, because that was a moment of connection that ended up being a turning point in my own life. That, the teachers were like coming right up to me. How can I support you? I feel the same way. I'm so glad you said it. I've been trying to hold myself together and I have not been well.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I just learned from that moment. I don't walk around saying I am feeling awful, or I'm not suggesting that. But what I will say is it is important for leaders to show that we are not perfect. It is important for leaders to show we don't always have the answers, because I think that opens up space and time for other people to come forward and feel okay to do the same. And that level of connection is not something I would have had I not shared what I was experiencing.
It's so true. I said to a colleague not too long ago, we're all going to have our turn where we fall apart. It's going to happen. We're
Yeah.
all going to have that time. And, to stand up in front of your staff and admit that as a mom and as an employee and as an educator and as a leader, you were struggling. I mean,
Yeah.
just think of how much of a relief that was to everybody in the room who had struggled, was struggling, or is bound to struggle in the future. It's
Yes.
we're all going to be there.
Yes.
Right.
And the other thing I say to staff is, like, it doesn't matter what you look like. I think educators are very, very good actors and actresses. In fact, I tell people when I was in college, we had to take an acting course. And I understand why, because sometimes we are put in situations and some circumstances that are extremely challenging. And we have learned to put on a face. We have learned to power through. We have learned to, that was a hard meeting, but I'm pivoting because I have another one coming and I have to get ready for it. Right. And so what I've learned is sometimes it cracks, and it's okay to say, I'm not okay right now, but I'm working on getting better and I'm taking steps to do that,
Right.
because it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. You can really be experiencing some challenges. And that's what happened to me.
Rachel, weren't you a kindergarten teacher?
Yes, I was.
You guys are the best actors
We are really
on
good.
the universe. It is a performance of all times, and the
All
kids are
day. I
all
all
day
day.
long,
I
all day
love
long.
it. I love it.
That's right. Brad, tell us about the hope framework. I really wanted our listeners to hear a little bit about this.
Yeah, so in the book we talk a little bit about it's kind of human nature. It's actually a survival thing. I call it rewired. Is one of the things. One of my keynotes is that we by nature focus on negativity because our brain is wired to keep us alive, and so what's going to hurt us? Something that's positive or something that's negative, and so it's the negatives that are going to kill us. So we're just naturally wired to look for whatever's negative. That's why it's so easy. We call it like negative contagion. To when someone's in a bad mood or negative, it's easy to kind of connect with them and be drawn into that. But we also lead that way because we naturally tend to focus on negative things, where we even inadvertently or subconsciously kind of looking for the negative things, the deficits. What are the teachers doing wrong? What do they need to work on? It's kind of how we're wired. And so the hope framework is kind of reframing that, is focusing on the positive, not, looking for the deficit all the time, or one of the things I joke about is when you go into a classroom, you don't always have to be coaching them. Go in, say something positive and go on. I call it leave the buts behind. Because that's what you're going to remember. Because again, remember, we're wired for negativity. I can tell you 3 positive things and 1 negative, and all you're going to do is remember that critique. And so hope is kind of changing that. It's flipping it, if you will, and to focus on the positive things. And so, hope, the acronym is hope, opportunity, praise, and encouragement. But it is about focusing on the positive aspects. What are they bringing? Give them opportunities to grow, to build their strengths, to really shine. And the praise is so important, that encouragement and valuing them. And then E is that encouragement part. We don't always have to be coaching. In fact, one of the things I like to tell administrators is teachers are their own worst critic, because, you think about, like I talked about, teachers being high agreeable, they're kind, they're caring, empathetic, but, they're also very high in conscientiousness, and most teachers tend to be. And so we're always judging ourselves, critiquing ourselves. And, very rarely will someone come in and say, here's something you might need to work on that they haven't thought about it a million times or beat themselves up over a million times. So it really is about reframing that to bring the positive, because we all know areas we need to work on. But if we really want what we call a growth mindset, we have to focus on the positive things. And if that becomes, in fact, the research says that it takes 5 positive interactions like praise to equal or to cancel out 1 negative or 1 critique. So we are 5 times more geared towards negativity anyway. So it's an effort that leaders need to consciously make. And that's what that hope framework is about, is transitioning to positivity. And not like, we always hear the word toxic positivity or whatever, but I'm like, I think negativity is much more toxic. But it really is about changing and focusing on, what are they doing well, praising them for the things that they do well, and encouraging them and helping them become their best, not just what do we need to work on.
I'm thrilled you said that. And I'm going to latch onto that word toxic, because I have a question for you. First, I want to tell you, though, I tell people all the time, nothing before the but matters.
Right.
If you say, I love your dress, but what's happening with your hair, I'm going to go redo my hair. I don't know what I'm wearing, but I'm going to redo my hair. Nothing before the but matters. No insults up here. Here's what the word toxic, you guys, I talk to a lot of principals, and a lot of them are like, okay, Schwanke, I hear what you're saying about culture and trust and conflict management, but I have this one teacher, this one toxic teacher. So thinking about relational intelligence, not just being nice, but being authentic, right? So tell us how, and maybe Rachel, you start us. How does an RQ-centered leader handle that toxic staff member that's doing damage without doing further damage to the overall relational health of the school?
That's $1 million question. And I have actually 2 schools of thought on that, just depending on the circumstances. Our district used to consult with Gallup, and they used to talk about strengths. And one of the things that came up, how do we move people in the towards different initiatives or things that are coming on if they don't want to do them, or if they are like solidly against or working against new things. And I think we do sadly have people that, we brush up against like that. And the presenter said, well, actually, that's not the group you want to focus on. You want to focus on moving the people. You have fast adopters and early adopters. They're going to go anyway. But it's the people in the middle who you want to work on moving in this direction, so that they do not get pulled and sucked into the other direction. And then, of course, our next question was, well, what do we do about the people who are in the back of the bus who don't want to move? And they said, ignore them. You have to actually move everyone away from that group until they have 1 or 2 decisions. They're either going to move with the rest of the school, or they will leave. So that's one school of thought. But another one is to address the person directly. And you need a relationship for that to happen. And that's why I think it's a challenge, because sometimes as leaders, we are just, we're human, we're things. So we tend to be around people who probably think like us, who probably, have similar styles of interacting or working, right? It's just kind of natural. But one of the things that I've learned is everybody in the building has something to offer. Everybody. And oftentimes, sometimes people get stuck in, being labeled certain ways because that time has not been given, or we're not really using their strengths in an appropriate way. Or sometimes people feel like, I have said the same feedback for 15 years and no one listens to me, so I'm not going to tell you anymore. I'm just going to tell the whole school, right? So, one of the great things about coming into as new principals or coming into new buildings is everyone gets that fresh start, and you have an opportunity to really tap into all the voices in a building. So one of the things I like to do, like right away, is offer times to meet with people, offer surveys, anonymous, in person, however you want to give me the feedback. And Dr. Johnson and I talk about this a lot, taking the feedback, listening, and acting on whatever we can and communicating that. Hey, I heard that this happened. Here's what I'm trying to do to help address this. I can't do this, but I can try that, right? So that process is really important to building trust across everybody. But if you have someone who's disengaged, that's a language that is used in strengths, then one of the ways to re-engage is to use that person's voice in a way that helps make improvements in the school.
Right. That makes so much sense. Tell me about this. And we only have 2 questions left, and I need to leave space for Dr. Johnson to tell us about Coffee with the Custodian, which might be the best book title ever created. But talk to our listeners. Another thing I hear besides the, oh my gosh, I have a toxic teacher, is help me balance work life. Help me, help me, help me.
Yes.
What do you guys have to say about that? Rachel, I know you've got, if I did the math right, your twins are teenagers.
Yes, they are teens. They're in high school now. It's hard to believe. Okay. They were 3 when I started as a school administrator and as an AP. So time is flying right on by. We actually dedicated chapter 9 of our book, Relational Intelligence, to exactly this, a whole chapter, because it is so critically important. At a minimum, what I share with people as someone who experienced a very high level of burnout during my first few years and almost quit my job and quit the profession is that I have learned over the years, we have to set boundaries in our work. This is such a challenging and demanding job that if we allow it to, it will suck up all of our energy and all of our time. And most school leaders are very high achieving. That's just, something that is about us that got us into the role. And so the flip side of that high achieving is that tendency to overwork. And sadly, I've had colleagues who have had heart attacks on the job. I've had colleagues who have passed away on the job just in the past year. And so that has renewed my energy to continue to message out that there is nothing more important than our families and your children, your pets, like whatever is important to you. That's not guaranteed. What is guaranteed is you might have another email. You're going to have another meeting. You're going to have someone come up to school and demand to speak to you. That's not going to change. But we do need to take a step back and say, I'm going to do my best at work when I'm at work, and I need time to regroup and recharge at home without guilt. And that's, a challenge, but that's something I'm continuing to ring the alarm about, ring that bell, because I've just seen the other side of what happens when we don't take care of ourselves. And it's so easy not to. It's so easy to skip a workout, to skip a meal, to skip going to the doctors because something has happened at school. And we really have to take stock and account of how we are living, how it is impacting our families, and make some small shifts. Small shifts make a difference.
And the administrator sets the tone for the teachers. Right. When they see Rachel taking care of herself, taking that time, they feel permission to do it. Mm-hmm. And so you're not just helping yourself, but you're helping the whole school culture. Mm-hmm. Because the burnout's real. It's not just teachers, it's administrators, especially at the school level. The research says like 60% feel like they are have depression or right on the border of depression. And then the turnover rate is probably higher, for for school principals, the school level leadership than any other. And so, well, maybe superintendent, but again, that we all have stress. So it's so important, like Rachel said, to set those boundaries, which is kind of hard again, because we're high agreeable people. It's hard to set those boundaries sometimes, but when the leadership can do it and the staff sees it, it helps everybody.
Mm-hmm. I remember saying to a colleague who was really not doing well, I said, I'm going to tell you something. Your district will take what it can get from you. So you're the only one that can decide what it's going to take from you. Dr. Johnson, tell us about Coffee with the Custodian.
Yeah, so I'm a storyteller. I'm from the South, if you can't tell by my accent. And so that's how I was raised. We tell stories. But really, it's not just a Southern thing, from Plato to Aristotle to Aesop fables. We're storytellers, and because that's how we learn, and that's how we remember. In fact, they say that we remember stories 20 times more or better than we do just statistics and data and information. So I was like, I've written 20-something books like we talked about, but I always remember people love the anecdotes the best, just like even in relational intelligence, we share stories, and that's what people remember, and that's what they like. So I'm like, why not just write the whole thing that way? Why not just write a story, a narrative? I call them edufables. And so the Coffee with the Custodian is the first full narrative for educational leadership, the first of its kind. And so I'm very excited about it. It just came out this week. And so, yeah, everybody loves the title. That's like the first hook, which is a great thing. And so my thought was, years ago, I remember someone telling that the word custodian actually means gatekeeper. And so when you think about a school, and Rachel can probably attest to this, who's the first person you meet, even like as the new principal coming to a school, who do they usually meet first? The office or the custodial workers. And they're the first ones they kind of connect with and start to build a relationship with. And my thing in the story, it's story driven with a new principal that's come in. Her name's Dr. Elena Harper, and she meets Lloyd, the first person at the school that she meets, sweeping in the hallway. And he sees her like looking stressed and stuff and offers her a cup of coffee, and just this kind of friendship develops. He reminds her of her grandfather, which kind of, helps understand why there's that connection. But he just shares his 40 years of experience in a school with a dozen different administrators that he's seen come through, what they did well, what they didn't do well. And because think about this, we always hear these and we see these memes where it's like, I was taught to treat the custodian the same as the CEO. But the reality is the custodian is largely invisible until they're needed. And so I thought that was just such an interesting perspective to me, because if you're invisible, that means you hear what's really going on. You hear what people really say, not just what they want other people to say, but when they're in the hallway or in their room or after a meeting, when they come out rolling their eyes, they see the real deal. And so it's just kind of that process of her coming into a new leadership role and kind of, sharing those stories and insight with him and growing through it, though. At the very end of the book, I have a study guide, just very broken down chapter by chapter, but it's really more about developing conversations. It gives ideas for whether you're principal, assistant principal, a coach, head of a department or whatever. And so it really is it's just that arc of her understanding that and it's a lot of what we talked about today, and it's why most people that read it, the endorsers and stuff are like, I see myself in that, so it's not just something you read to get some facts. You see yourself in it and you kind of experience it. And so it makes it memorable, but it's just that process of her understanding it's not about me anymore. I got to this role because of what I could do, but now it's about how I help everybody else become their best so that we're successful.
Nice. Nice. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Yes, when I was preparing for this podcast, I stumbled across that book and thought, oh, first of all, my timing is great. But second of all, I can't wait to dig into that. So for those of you listening, if you want to move from management to leading a people business, I really recommend their new book, Relational Intelligence. You can find more of Dr. Brad Johnson's work at drbradjohnson.com and follow Dr. Rachel Edoho-Eket's journey at racheledoho-eket.com. We're going to have all those links in the show notes for you. So Brad, Rachel, thank you so much for the incredible work you're doing for educators and really for the students, for all of our bosses that benefit from this leadership.
Thank you so much for having us. This was a fun
Yeah,
conversation.
thank you.
Good. Thank you so much. And to our listeners, remember, your title gives you your position, but the relationships are what really matters. So go out there and lead with some relational intelligence this week. We will see you next time on Principal Matters.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.